Hey, Michael McGinnis here. So let's talk about that first stage, personal growth. Personal growth is to clean out our own house before we can begin to instruct others to clean their house, right? It's that fundamental principle is we can't teach others to do something we haven't done ourselves. We all have personal issues, behaviors, unhealthy beliefs that all result in negative consequences in our life and in overall unhappiness. The focus on this stage is to one, learn how to go within to identify the root cause of our unhappiness. Two, to heal our past, very often the origin of a lot of our unhealthy beliefs. And so many of our fundamental beliefs and values are formed during our formative years, in our very early years, between 5 and 7 years old. Three, to develop our self-esteem and healthy core beliefs. That's the essence of it, right? Is with a good, sound self-esteem, healthy core beliefs, that we're back on track. We're living a happier existence. Our behaviors are consistent with these beliefs, and our consequences are better. Four, to develop a new sense of courage and excitement about life, right? That zest for life. Here we are. This is our life. Let's make the most out of it. These are the basis for learning how to take charge of your life and make more positive choices so that we go from being a victim to a victor. Personal growth creates our sails, right? Imagine as if we're creating a sailboat, right? So that's going to be an essence of us moving us along in our journey. So personal growth creates our sails, right? First, you need sails to be able to have a sailboat, so that you can go from feeling stuck in a rut to beginning to move forward in your life. The stages, as are shown in the image on my website and others, show the three stages, right? There's the personal growth stage we're talking about here, self-discovery, and then ultimately, if you choose to go further, to enlightenment. The stages were reviewed in the Frameworks podcast. They represent separate and distinct stages. For example, I met individuals who had a deep understanding of life and their purpose. However, they were relatively clueless to their personal issues and still had them and causing constant consternation in their life. So what prompts people to begin their personal journey? Based on asking this question at the beginning of my talks, many of the recipients shared what turned out to be very common responses. When I meet with clients during the first session, I ask a series of questions to understand their motivation, which is usually a negative consequence they're experiencing in their life. Makes sense, right? We're prompted by a cause, something negative, right? A positive typically isn't going to cause a reaction. Something is not right, and these individuals have the courage to own up to this reality versus hiding or masking the truth. The emotional response to the situation is often pain and suffering, which becomes the motivation to simply stop the pain and suffering. Who wants to be there? There are, however, other reasons that drive people to personal growth. Examples of this include deeper questions and an intellectual intrigue with learning different aspects of life. However, the most common reason is to stop the pain and suffering they are experiencing as a result of something currently going on in their life. A professional, a therapist, a counselor, or other, is often helpful to understand a motivation. This is because we often do not know what is truly bothering us. Again, a factor that we may be avoiding the truth. Let me share a personal example. Work appeared to be going well. I was recently promoted to a manager role. A few months in, my boss met with me to check in. I reiterated the same, that work was going well. He mentioned to me that he heard great feedback overall from the others, with one exception, and that was that some of my direct reports did not feel as though I was interested in their input. I followed the advice of my boss to utilize a 360-degree assessment to obtain anonymous feedback from the team, right? I didn't know what was going on, and neither did my boss. All we knew was the consequence, right? That people were voicing their opinion, that they were unhappy, that I wasn't soliciting or listening to their feedback. There were some areas that represented concerns, as they were hard to accept at first. But with the support of my boss, I accepted their feedback and sought ways to make improvements, which I did and appeared to correct my team's concerns, right? So what this is all about is the process of being able to work with some method, in this case, my boss and an assessment tool that really helped me to better understand what was going on. It's hard for us to be able to look at a situation and be able to see it clearly because so often we're blinded by our own perceptions that we're right, they're wrong, I could do no wrong, or I am the problem, I'm always the issue. Any of these things could block us from really clearly understanding what's going on. It was interesting because in this assessment, there were other areas of feedback that concerned me. Maybe they didn't represent that as to the rest of the team, but it did to me. This had to do with a summary from the 360-degree assessment tool, which stated that my overall profile was characteristic of individuals experiencing high stress levels. Wow, that was an impact to me. This did not really represent a concern of my boss because it wasn't affecting my work. So I inquired, how can I learn more about this? What does this really mean? He suggested that I meet with our Employee Assistance Program counselor, EAP counselor, which we did have within our workplace. During the first session, she began to ask questions, about different aspects of my work and what was going on, and then it started to venture into questions about my childhood. I was confused. Why are you asking me questions about my childhood? Well, I allowed the process to unfold and I went back, which I was going to include a couple of more sessions. And at the end of the third session, she suggested that I meet with a counselor since she felt that exploring my past would help me better understand my current levels of stress, right? So she saw something that I didn't see myself. Maybe I wasn't ready to, or could I really grasp or understand what she was saying? So she suggested that I work with a professional who can help me to begin to peel away the onion and understand what was going on. Short of the long story, here was that in counseling, I broke through a wall of denial that was protecting me from the truth of what had actually happened during my childhood. Although tempted to run away to avoid this ugly and overwhelming realization, I chose to stick with the counselor since I knew I needed to deal with this. This was a turning point in my life as I made a decision to confront my past so I would no longer be victim to the pain and suffering it caused. I would learn how to be a victor instead and take charge of my life. Right. So this was interesting, as is that why didn't I even have a clue with respect to my past? Well, it was simply because it was so traumatic that characteristic often of many who experience that type of trauma pushed it to the back of my mind. I chose not to focus on it. I actually was covering it up, masking it up so that I never really had to confront the ravages that I had experienced in that time. Not uncommon, I had learned. So the process of personal growth began. It was like peeling an onion. In fact, I have a diagram of this peeling the onion, as I refer to it, in the actual blog for this post on my blog site, discoverinmichael.wordpress.com. The process of personal growth began. The onion is a great analogy to work within the personal growth stage. It is a matter of taking a hard look within to grow our self-awareness and what is behind the good, bad, and ugly aspects of our life. Let's take a look at some of these layers. As I mentioned, they were in this diagram. The outer layer of the onion, and then we'll begin to move inside to sort of the core of what's in the onion, sort of characteristic or analogous to ourselves. Let's begin to start looking from the outside and begin working in to sort of see what's really in our subconscious, our beliefs, our values, etc. Our outer self. An outer layer protects the more fragile interior of an onion. This would be characteristic of how we portray ourselves to the outside world, including our behaviors and consequences we experience. At this point, we operate largely unconsciously, and we are not familiar of why we even act like we do. We simply react to the external stimulus around us. We view ourselves as a victim and causing the negative experiences that we are experiencing. The work at this point would be identify our negative and positive consequences we experience, along with our own behaviors that lead up to these consequences. This is a process later in personal growth I refer to as the ABC model. We begin to see the cause and effect relationship between our own behaviors and the consequences we are experiencing. Wow, tough to see, right? We don't want to look at ourselves in the mirror. We want to blame others. We learn that we have choices, which at this point is the choice to take charge of our life. In my case, one of the negative consequences and patterns was struggling with my personal relationships. I blamed this on the women in my life. My counselor helped me get past this victim mentality and begin to see and own up to what I was doing, my own behaviors that were contributing to this pattern or negative pattern. It was not easy to see or admit at first. Until later, I began to be able to look through it. Actually, up front, it was easier to blame the others, in this case, the women I was dating. The next level are facades. We all wear masks and create facades to some type or another to cover up our insecurities and fears. These are often learned and developed early on in our development so that we look cool, tough, sexy, successful, to be accepted and fit in with others, something we all want. This is the exterior, the ego that we show to the others. It is often very superficial in nature. Yet our true self comes out when we spend time with others on a regular basis or live with them for a length of time. Others begin to see our true self. I was able to attract women with my strong physique and giving them what they wanted, right? I had learned what was needed to, right, to really to go through it, to be able to successfully be able to date women. However, once we moved in together, it was when my insecurities began to surface. And it was my low self-esteem and my continual need to seek their approval and love from me, which over time would serve to push them away. The work at this point begins by making a choice to accept responsibility for my actions. So at this point in the counseling and peeling away the onion, I'm beginning to start seeing that this negative consequence I was experiencing, that I was contributing to that with these behaviors that already started to get some definition. What was behind them was this low self-esteem and need for approval. It often requires the help of a trained professional to create a safe setting to allow you to begin opening up, and then to help you identify your actions contributing to the situation. Letting down our guard is hard. It's scary. Our ego worked overtime to create the illusion that we are okay. And now you must take off these masks and facades, just like peeling away the onion. That's why I like the analogy of an onion, because as you peel an onion, in the kitchen for your preparation, food preparation, very often you experience tears, right? Just from the smell or whatever it is about peeling away an onion. So it creates that. And I think that that's very analogous to the process, these early stages of growth is peeling it away. It's really very often going to pain or create some pain, such as our own tears, as we begin to start confronting and facing the truth, many times that we didn't really want to see. This can take several sessions to reach this point, but it becomes a major milestone in your personal growth. The next layer, perceptions. Behind our facades are the perceptions we formed of self and of people and life in general. In my case, it was my perception that women were the problem as it related to my issue. We have perceptions about most everything in life. These perceptions become our biases and prejudices or perceptions. It's the way we choose to see the world. And we're very often unconscious or not conscious of this aspect of ourselves, right? Because it's buried deep in our subconscious, and we're just acting sort of what we see naturally based on these deep-rooted beliefs. The work at this point is to recognize and be honest with self and respect your perceptions that are formed about what they were really doing, and are they something that we really want to keep or not? For example, We have a perception that work sucks. These perceptions are the equivalent of filters over our eyes. They filter what we see to be complicit, or basically to agree with our bias or perception, in this case, that work sucks. Based on this perception, we see all of the difficulties and hardships associated with work in this case, which only serve to support our perception that work sucks. Perceptions only serve to create self-fulfilling prophecies. If we believe work sucks and act like work sucks, arriving late, doing a minimum amount of work, avoiding work, etc., and then we get reprimanded, maybe even fired, we once again conclude that work sucks. The challenge is to become aware of our perceptions, which is hard to do because they've been so ingrained in our belief system. And this is where we begin to see the creation of these negative self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Work sucks, so we're only seeing work suck. We're acting in a way that work sucks. We get the negative consequence that we get reprimanded or fired, and then it goes back to our attitude and belief that work sucks, right? So we just are in this constant self-fulfilling prophecy. The next level of the onion is nurture nature. Nature refers to the biological genetic predispositions impact on human traits, and nurture describes the influence of learning and other influences from one's environment. We are who we are today is a result of many factors. A lot of our makeup comes from nurture and nature. Nature refers to our genetics, and nurture refers to our experiences. Our family origin, particularly our parents, school, on what we are continually exposed to, and dynamics around us, for example, our neighborhood, what we watch on TV, all play a key part in our experiences and our early development. The experiences during our childhood can form lasting perceptions about who we are and of life itself. Simply put, when we experience unhealthy conditions, for example, trauma, bullying, abuse, etc., we form unhealthy beliefs, values, and perceptions. These lie deep in our subconscious, and this work right now is about unearthing them, becoming aware of them, and then beginning to see is that, no, it's not just the others. Yes, they may have contributed to it, but as a result of these experiences, I've developed these unhealthy beliefs and values that are continually supporting this negative self-fulfilling prophecies or patterns. And we often have many of these negative or unhealthy patterns in our life. Nurture had the most significant impact for me. It was, in effect, the lack of nurture for me. This related to the trauma and abuse I experienced during my childhood and formative years. The outcome from this were many unhealthy beliefs that formed emotional scars, low self-esteem and self-image, fears, and personal issues. These all served to inhibit my personal growth and development and tainted my view of people in life. No wonder I had challenges as I left and started out my early adult life. Consider the basic needs of a child in order to develop a healthy self-esteem and image. The ideal is that we receive unconditional love along with positive affirmations about who and what we are. What we know is that this is not the case for many. Along with the way we come to believe that love is conditional and based on pleasing others first. Anger is expressed in ways that tell us that we are bad or wrong, which experienced enough times becomes our basic belief about ourselves, which was the case for me. Almost on a daily basis, I told that I would never amount to anything. I was never going to be good enough. And of course, at a young, very impressionable state, I came to believe that about myself. The work here is often with a counselor, helping us to initially to connect the dots with respect to our negative consequences and to our behaviors, perceptions and attitude, and ultimately to our past. Then begins the process of healing and building ourselves back up, right? So this is the initial part to really just start to dig in, understand what's going on, begin to unearth by looking and delving back into our subconscious, what was happening, why it was happening, what were the original experiences created that, so that then we can begin the healing and building ourselves up. We identify our gaps, the issues, our fears, etc. Then internally, the core of the onion is our true self. It's the process of peeling away the many layers of self that we come to understand the good, bad, and ugly of who we are, right? Painful as it may be, which is why people tend to avoid this process, once we have this awareness, then we can begin to start rebuilding ourselves the way we want to be. Through the above process, we come to understand why this was. Why did this happen? Now is the time to learn how to love and accept who we truly are, why we are the way we are, and to develop the needed elements of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual being to create a new and healthy foundation for our life and build our self-esteem, self-image, and self-perception of ourselves. This is the essence of the work we can do at this point to develop ourselves into a very productive and successful human being. Once we're on our feet again, comfortable with who we are, have that self-esteem, then we begin the further next stage in development, self-discovery, which is where we understand who and why we are, but mostly who we want to be. Hey, thanks for listening. Hope this helped. And be sure to listen in to the next step as we delve into the self-discovery stage.